Mindful Happy Kids, created and narrated by Dr. Elisabeth Paige, consists of interviews with children's authors and poets and illustrators, musicians of all types, and yoga and mindfulness practitioners. Dr. Paige also reads from her own children's books on compassion, gratitude, mindfulness, and yoga. Pippi the puppy and Dr. Paige practice meditations or pet-centered meditations, which are recorded as part of the videos. So, Jerry Craft, thank you so much for doing this. I really have been looking forward to this, and I'm sure this will be fantastic for our listeners and viewers. And this is Jerry Craft, and he has written several books. He was a cartoonist for many years before he started writing books, and he's written how many novels? One novel?
So it's kind of weird because the ones that people know me for are New Kid, School Trip, and Class Act. But I have a whole stack of self-published books that I did for 20 years that nobody knows about. So if you count all those and combine everything since I started self-publishing in 1997, it's about maybe 32 books all
Oh,
total.
wow. Well, I'm going to have you talk about some of those then.
Okay, I will.
We'd like to hear about it. I got a copy of the Offenders, and I
Okay.
definitely want to talk about that because that was fantastic. But let's start a little bit with your writing journey and stuff like that before we dive into specific books.
Okay.
So, do you want to say any more about yourself to introduce yourself?
Well, like Jordan Banks in New Kid, I was actually born in Harlem. I grew up in Washington Heights. The house where Jordan Banks lives is the house where I grew up.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yep, three-story brownstone in Washington Heights. Um, went to small schools that had 24, 25 kids in the class. Always wanted to be an artist. My mom and dad, like Jordan's parents, did not want me to be an artist. So they sent me to this prestigious private school in Riverdale called Fieldston. And every day I took the bus, the 100 bus from my home in Washington Heights to Fieldston, Riverdale, and back again. So it was really going almost between two different planets. It was pretty different for me, especially at that age, um, seeing a world I had never seen before. So I really know that world and that journey well. So that's why I was able to put so much of it into New Kid and Class Act and School Trip.
Interesting. How about your book, The Offenders? Where did that all come from?
So my two sons went to a school in New Canaan, Connecticut, and they used to have a lot of programs on bullying. And I was like, huh, I want to do my own book on bullying, but I wanted to do it from a different slant. Most books that you see on bullying are about kids who are the targets of bullies. They're the ones that are getting picked on. And I always try to take my books and twist it around until the viewpoint is a little bit more unique. So I decided to do mine about kids who kind of are the bullies. I always loved superhero comics. I was a big Marvel guy. And so I decided to combine them. I said, what if these kids who are the bullies at this school, they get zapped, they get these superpowers, but instead of looking cool like Spider-Man or Deadpool or Wolverine or Black Panther or Wonder Woman, they look like the kids who they pick on. So one kid gains like 50 pounds and one gets spaghetti thin and one, is always like, oh, you're so mousy. She shrinks down to the size of a mouse. Other kid teases someone with braces, so he gets these two big metallic buck teeth. And it's one of those things where um, I wanted to have them really develop a sense of empathy, and show that what they are doing and how they're treating these other kids is wrong. And I found that over the years, um, that I have a hard time writing books that don't have some kind of a teaching component, as far as morals or empathy and, you know, just being kind, you know. Um, and so that's where that came from. So my sons were in middle school at the time, and I would read it to them as they came home from school. And one day my oldest son was, Dad, no kid would say that. And I'm like, well, how do you know what a kid would say? You're just a kid, And I realized, I'm like, well, wait a minute. You know what? Just like they learn from me as their dad, I'm going to take this opportunity to learn from them. And so I put a lot of the stuff that mirrored their middle school experience of playing Foursquare and kids starting to get Instagram and people doing this and kids doing this. And it really resonated with readers. The only bad thing is I didn't have the platform to get the book out. I didn't have distribution. I didn't have, a big social media presence. And so that was the kind of stuff that kind of hindered it. But everyone that I know that has read the book has really, really enjoyed it. So I think at some point I'm going to have to turn that into a graphic novel.
Well, I would really recommend that anyone who's listening to this recommend this as a book to be read in a middle school, or at least put in a middle school library,
Okay,
because I
cool.
found it to be just a really important book on bullying, and a
Oh,
way I think that kids would be able to understand and internalize it in a
right. Do
way
you have
that,
your
I mean,
copy?
sometimes, yeah, I do right here.
Okay, yeah, there you go. And so it says Jerry Craft, and then my two sons, I gave them writer credit. So with Jerry Craft and Aaron Craft. And you know what's so funny is um, I met this author and gave him a copy, and he really liked it. And he said, Hey, how would you and your sons like to be some of the first authors to come and do a book signing at my store? He was opening up a new bookstore. And we were struggling authors. He was a struggling author, so we wanted to help him out. And so we went, and we were some of the first authors to ever do a book signing at this guy's bookstore. And I don't take a lot of credit for stuff that I don't deserve, but I will say that once me and my son signed at his store and started hanging out with him, that young Mr. Jeff Kinney really took off. That Wimpy Kid book of his, everything just skyrocketed. So, Jeff Kinney, if you're listening out there, you're welcome.
Well, that's great. We all want to do good. What do they say? Pay it forward?
Pay it forward. Yep.
Well, that's great. Well, do you want to take me through your writing journal and your illustrating journal? Journey, I'm sorry, journal, journey.
Journey. So, I always wanted to do books that were a little different. And by different, I just mean that a lot of books for kids are can be very serious and very heavy. And I think specifically for African American kids, it is there's a disproportionate amount of books that are very tough subject matter wise. You've got police brutality, you've got slavery, you've got the civil rights movement. And I just didn't see enough books that were just Harry Potter, but the kids are African American, or Percy Jackson or Wimpy Kid, or, like Raina's books. And so when I started to self-publish, I not only did my own books, I did a Mama's Boys book, which is based on my syndicated comic strip. And then other people started coming to me and saying, "Hey, we can't get published either. Can you help us publish our books?" And that's what I did. So over about a 20-year span from about 1997 to maybe 2017, was my own independent book publisher
Oh,
and
cool.
published, like I said, about 30 books. And then it really wasn't until I would say, I think it was 2016, I got an offer to illustrate a book for Scholastic called The Zero Degree Zombie Zone.
Yes.
And once I did that, Scholastic started to send me places. And, and that was when I first met Raina Telgemeier and Gene Yang and Jeff Smith. And I was like, wow, the effect that these books have on kids is amazing, because I never saw that, because as a kid, I hated to read. I was not a book person. I don't ever remember meeting an author until I was one. I had no aspirations to ever write books. I wanted to be a Marvel comic artist, draw Spider-Man. And when I started meeting these people, then it was really like, wow, I think I want to do this. I think I want to be Raina Telgemeier. And so everything kind of changed at that point. Yeah.
Interesting. So is that when you started thinking about graphic novels?
Yeah. So graphic novels were tough because um, as a self-publisher, from a financial aspect, it just didn't make sense, because I couldn't afford to publish a 200-page book in color. So the book that you have in your hands, The Offenders, is all black and white, and it's a 200-page book, but it was affordable. So each unit cost might be, say, $4 it costs me. But if I were to print that same book in color, 200 pages, it might have cost me $10 back in the day. So I would have had to charge $25 just to be able to, give a percentage in the stores and, the markup and make any kind of a profit. So if it were left up to me, I was not going to be able to do that. I did end up publishing a Mama's Boys book, Mama's Boys in Living Color, which is a 96-page graphic novel that I could afford to do. But I definitely would never have been able to do New Kid on my own. I would have had to order thousands and thousands of copies in order to bring that price point down. And I just wasn't able to do it at that point.
Now, with The Offenders, you do have lots of illustrations in there that are an important part of the book,
Right. But they're black and white.
but they are black and white. Yes.
Right. So
Unlike
that's where the
the
savings were.
trilogy.
If they were in color, then that would have doubled or tripled the price of the book to me.
Okay.
And I was not able to do that, especially for a 200-page book. Yeah. So let me go over to my bookshelf real quick.
Sure.
And so like some of the books that I had self-published. Okay, so I did books on my own, like The Offenders, and then I published a series of Mama's Boys books. So these are anthologies, like collections of my comic strips, and they're black and white. So I did 3 of these. I did, and they're all out of print. So Mama's Boys as American Sweet Potato Pie, Mama's Boys, The Big Picture, and Mama's Boys Homeschooling. And then people started coming to me and saying, hey, can you help me publish my book? And like I said, that's when I started working with other authors. And Khalil's Way was like the first chapter book that I ever did. I did the illustrations and the layout and got the ISBN number and, worked with the author David Miller on this. And then I just started doing lots and lots of picture books. And that was
So
really,
mostly stuff with African Americans?
yeah, almost exclusively. Again, because I just feel like there wasn't enough that just showed, kids happy. Danica Dramatica. This is about a contest that they're in. A is for Anacostia, about the section of DC, Anacostia, or S is for South Side. You know, this is one written by a doctor, kids who get surgery. So when it
Ah,
was appropriate, I had a very diverse cast, but for the most part, when you're talking about something like this, my hair is curly. I
yes, yeah.
wanted to, because a lot of the kids didn't see books like this. There are a disproportionate amount of books on Martin Luther King and Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth, and they're important, but when you see something like this, what's below your tummy tum, you know, I didn't do it, it wasn't me, where a kid can actually relax and read the book, and the parents don't have to worry about, you know, in this case, having to talk about death or, anything like that. Baby boy, what will you be? Now I did do one of the first ones about three little girls whose father had passed away, but that was planned. That was what the book was about. It wasn't like, a Disney cartoon where every parent in every Disney cartoon ever just gets like mauled or maimed or something horrible happens. This is just because of a family reunion or Harper counts a blessing. So this is what I did for about 20 years, and this
I'd
is
like
what
to
I
spend some time in your house going through your books.
oh, okay, well, come on down. But you know what I mean? Like, so it was just these kind of books that I wanted to do that were fun. And I didn't see many publishers uh printing those kind of books, you know, and I did not want to do books on slavery. I did not want to do historic fiction. I did not want to do police brutality. I just wanted to, like, what book would have made me a reader as a kid? And those are the books that I try to do.
Interesting.
And I tell, like, when I do school visits, I say for all the girls, like, well, two things. Uh, if it's, kids, I will say, what if the only books for girls were books about being a mermaid or being, riding unicorns all day and being a princess? Like, if that's not your thing, but that's all there is, or disproportionate, and you want to be a Supreme Court justice, or you want to be an MMA fighter, or you want to be an optometrist, it may be up to you to write that book. But it was even worse because of the heavy content. Like, I would say to you, if the only books that you had as a girl were books like A Handmaid's Tale, that's not really fun reading for a kid. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And that's the kind of trauma that I felt that a lot of our kids were having. And then they grew up so fast, and you're like, oh, well, they're not kids. Well, you didn't let them be kids. You gave them this, you know, every good thing that happened in the book was followed by some kind of catastrophe, you
Yeah,
know.
and one of the books in the trilogy, they go to a book fair, and you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so they go to a book fair, and the librarian comes over, and there's one African American kid, one white kid, and to the white kid she gives The Magic of the Magic Magicon, a magical adventure. And to the black kid she gives The Mean Streets of South Uptown, a gritty urban portrayal of the grit of today's urban grittiness. And the kid Maury is like, yeah, I can't relate to this. My dad is a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And she's like, oh, but I think that too many people put those kind of assumptions that we all want to read about gangs and, you know, not having family units and being in prison and stuff like that. And I was like, if I have to self-publish the rest of my life, then I'm going to, because I'm not going to do those books. And again, they are important, and I'm glad we have them. But I think Dogman is important. If your kid can't wait until the next Dogman comes out and reads it cover to cover, or Wimpy Kid, that's an important book. So it really
Absolutely.
wasn't until this is the Zero Degree Zombie Zone. Um,
Okay.
and I got hired by Anja Pinkney at Scholastic, and she let me illustrate that. And that was the book that, like I said, once I started going around with Scholastic and seeing Jean Yang and Reina and Kazuo Kibuishi and, you know, all those people, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you did. I
Well,
think
me
it's
too.
important.
Yeah.
This is interesting. I was talking to this 15-year-old kid who I work with. I do pet-centered meditations with her. She has
Hmm.
anxiety, and I do pet-centered meditations with her. And she was telling me about her classes, and they're reading one of your books in her English class.
Oh, that's the coolest.
Isn't that great? I was like,
I
that is
love
so
hearing that.
cool.
I remember going back to my old high school, and they had a class set of American-born Chinese. And I just thought that was the coolest. I was like, I can't imagine what it's like to be reading a graphic novel in English class. And that became one of my new goals. And now I see that I've seen all of my books in summer reading. I've seen part of the curriculum. I've seen teachers' colleges where, they're teaching teachers, and they're using this to show them like the kinds of books that will relate to kids and how to dissect it, just like it was Hemingway. And that is pretty amazing.
It's so exciting. I was so excited. I told her and I told you I was interviewing you. She was like, "Oh, that's so great. I can't wait."
Yeah, no, it's very excited to see some of the things that have happened.
Yeah. So, what is the difference for you between the process of writing a graphic novel versus writing a more sort of standard novel or a
A
narrative
prose
novel?
novel. So a prose novel to me is so much quicker, right? Um, One is I don't have to do the research to capture the visuals. I don't have to show everything. So, for example, I don't have to describe a character from head to toe. But if I'm doing a graphic novel, I better know what they look like from head to toe. I know
Interesting.
that Jordan carries his backpack and he carries it one strap on his right shoulder. His backpack is always open. He has the strap that hangs down. He's got his sketchbook. You know, um, Alexandra always wears her sock puppet and she has long sleeves, and I know what sneakers they wear. And even in a prose novel, if I say Jordan comes in, walks in the classroom, and sits down next to Liam, well, what does Liam look like? What position is he sitting in? What does the classroom look like? So now I have to research classrooms. When I go to schools, I'll look and say, okay, well, what's on the desk? On the teacher's desk, there's books, there's a stapler, there's something on the floor, on the walls, there's maps, there's books, you know, there's a smart board. If it's younger class, they may have, the penmanship thing at the top or the states. So I have to plan out everything. And I wouldn't have to describe it in that kind of detail in a prose novel.
Got it.
So Jordan's apartment, I had to physically do a layout of his apartment. Where's the bathroom? Even if I never show the bathroom, I have to know where it is. You know, where's the bathroom? Where's the bedroom? Where's the dining room? What kind of refrigerator they have? What kind of stove? So there's so much. Um, and then that's not even talking about the visual component that I use to help to tell the story. Because one mistake that a lot of younger artists do make is that if they're drawing, they may feel like they have to repeat what the image shows, right? So they're like, oh, I'm so thirsty. I'm going to drink this big glass of water. Well, it's not necessary. That's redundant. You
Yeah.
know, you may say something like, oh, I'll be glad when they fix the elevator. So by seeing that and someone drinking water, then you can assume that they're probably on the top floor and they are exhausted. You know what I mean? Um, so with something like this, when Jordan goes to the cafeteria and you see him like 4 inches tall, you know, I don't have to say, oh, I feel small and insignificant. I don't know anyone. You know what I mean? You don't have to be redundant. And to me, that just makes it better. And that's why when people say that graphic novels aren't real reading, I beg to differ. I think it stimulates your brain in two ways because, you know, when I'm talking about Maury and Jordan, and by seeing them literally standing on two different planets from two different worlds, and then the impact of them walking away from each other, you know that they just feel like they have nothing in common.
Yeah.
Um, so even a kid, like if I drew a picture of Jordan and he's smiling, he says, "That's just great," and the picture looks like this, you know, something good happened. If I have the same words and I have Jordan doing this, and the cap says, "That's just great," a kid has to figure out, okay, he's not happy. So there's some sarcasm going on there. He doesn't really think it's great. He's like, okay, what's going on? So to me, graphic novels stimulate your brain in a variety of other manners than if it is specifically a prose book. And obviously, that's not a knock on prose books at all, but it is a little bit more validation to teachers who think that graphic novels are still Archie or Richie Rich or the old Barbie, Scooby-Doo comics, things like that.
Well, they've definitely grown in leaps and bounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's many, many more now than there
Oh
used
yeah.
to be.
Like when I read American Born Chinese, that was an eye-opener for me. And also David Small, Stitches by David Small.
Okay.
Those are the two that was like, oh wow, I can really put in some content that I don't have to um self-edit, you know, and I can really do a important and well-rounded story. So yeah, I owe a lot to those two. And Roller Girl and El Defo and
Yes. Yes.
and Smile, obviously.
Yes. So you interwove Jordan's sketchbook throughout the books.
Right.
Can you talk about that process? I think it worked amazingly well. And would you like me to show, or do you want to show some of them?
Sure. So two things that I did in the book, because to be honest, I hadn't seen um a lot of books, especially, humorous graphic novels by African Americans. And I did feel in a lot of ways like I had the weight of the world on me, that if the book did not do well, then when Jamar Nicholas or Tim Fielder or some of my other buddies went to, sell their manuscripts, that they'd be like, well, we tried a Black graphic novel and it didn't work. So we're going to wait another 40 years, you
Hmm.
know? So I wanted to make it as appealing to adults, as I did, as it was to kids. And so one of the things is with the chapter headings, for example, um, they all gave a nod to some kind of popular movie or book or something like this. And so this one is The Road to Rivendell, There and Back Again. And this was a takeoff on The Hobbit, because if you see how Jordan is standing, that is a takeoff on Bilbo Baggins and The Hobbit. So he wrote a book called The Road to Rivendell, and mine is The Road to Riverdale, There and Back Again. And I kind of did that, this Middle Earth, and maybe only a quarter of the people get it, but the ones that get it really get it. I'm like, oh my God, and that's kind of funny. I like the fact that some people don't get it, because it makes it kind of like a little club, because people are so proud when they get it. Um, the other thing is when I give Jordan's perspective, like a journal. This is when he starts to go out for a team, and he goes out for his soccer team. And again, instead of having a long soliloquy, it's just like Jordan's Guide to Fall Sports, you know. And he talks about the team one varsity and the team two varsity, and team three is thirds. And then he says, they even made me captain of the team because I'm the only kid who never threw up during practice and has never had a concussion. Now, the varsity games are amazing. Players soar high into the air to make acrobatic kicks, and parents pack the stands to cheer for their kids. And like, yay, score. Meanwhile, our games look more like the casting for a low-budget karate movie. Parents use the time to check email or play Words with Friends. And when the dad goes, yay, triple word score. So that's just like a little bit of added humor. Um, some of them have a little bit more oomph to them, you know. Um, but again, I wanted to appeal to as many different kinds of people, as many different ages, because I didn't want it to be um, boxed into a, you know, graphic novel specifically for African American kids from 8 to 12. You know what I mean? Like that would be very limited. Um, so that was my goal. And I looked at heavy hitters. I was like, if I could do the characters and the dialogue of Raina Telgemeier, the humor of Jeff Kinney, and the art of Kazuo Kibuishi, and there's some stuff that I love that Jimmy Gownley does visually. And so I really started with, at the top, and wanted to borrow from each of them to something that I could do well and make it my own. And that was what I kind of strived for.
It also seemed like a lot of life's lessons happened in Jordan's sketchbook.
Yeah, because as a kid of the 70s, you know, everything, all the entertainment, they did not separate entertainment from education. So in other words, there's Sesame Street, there's a lecture company, there was Zoom, there's the Magic Garden, cartoon wise, there was Fat Albert, and all of them had like these life lessons. And then in between, there were things like Schoolhouse Rock, Multiplication Rock, and Time for Timer, which taught you how to eat healthy, and all these different things that I still remember to this day. If I have to use a conjunction, that conjunction, what's
Conjunction,
your function
junction,
called?
what's my function?
Right. And or I'm just a bill and some of those. And I'm like, if I could do those kind of things, um, I would just feel like I would have a fulfilled life as an author and children's book illustrator.
Interesting. Well, I think it was very successful, actually. I think
Thank you.
it wasn't preachy. It didn't feel preachy. It just felt like you were putting forth your ideas and your, not so much morals, but life's understandings in a accessible way.
Yeah, and that was my goal. Like, I wish I could type that out and just put that on my website. But every once, of course, like people love to be the first on your bandwagon, and then they love to be the first off. So there are people like, oh, in School Trip, he was preaching about don't waste water and you gotta turn off the sink when you brush your teeth. And I thought that was a bit uh heavy-handed. I'm like, dude, really? That's what you found? Right? That I kind of hinted, maybe don't waste water when you brush your teeth in one panel, and that's your takeaway from the book. I'm like, okay, that's fine.
Hmm.
Guilty as charged, you know. Um, so, the reviews are going to be the reviews, and I actually do read like every one that I possibly can, even the one-star ones, what some of them are just like, yeah, the guy I ordered New Kid and the guy from Amazon threw it on my porch in a puddle. 1 star. I'm like, you're not reviewing the Amazon guy, you're reviewing my book, something that took me 2 years to do, and you're going to give me 1 star because the Amazon man put it in a puddle on your porch? I'm like, so, you really have to have a certain amount of brush it off and keep going.
Interesting. So you're dealing a lot with socioeconomic status and race in an important way. I wanted to bring up an issue which is really important, which I haven't read all that much about in middle grade novels, graphic or otherwise, and that's the skin tone.
Oh, okay.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, colorism is huge. And so even within our own communities, African American and Latinx, there is a big thing with colorism. And you know, Hollywood has gotten a little better, but if you look at certain movies that feature Black and Latino characters for years, it was always, people my complexion, you know, and even, if you look at like the Cosbys and Martin and My Wife and Kids, it was always a darker skinned African American man with a light skinned woman with straight hair. And when it was time for me to do my book, I just wanted to break as many stereotypes as I possibly could. And even though it's a little thing, but I did the dad my complexion and his wife darker with natural hair. And I have the dad as the one who likes to cook, and the mom earns 6 figures working in publishing, doing the whole corporate thing. Sometimes the mom drives, sometimes the dad drives. I really didn't want to fall victim to what I see other people do. I write and draw the change that I would like to personally see,
Hmm.
and to validate, as many people as I can, because so I had done this from mainly an African American perspective. And then I went to a school one day. This young girl was like, Mr. Kraft, how come there are no girls from India in your book? I was like, oh, no. I hadn't thought of it. I was like, what's your name? My name is Malika. Okay, next book, I'll put a little Indian girl named Malika in the book. Mr. Kraft, how come there's no Muslim girl in your book? I don't know. So I put a little Muslim girl named Samira. And when I put the Muslim girl in, I didn't make her the victim of every Muslim character that I had seen in the book previously. She is not the one being bullied. I have her with the sharpest tongue of all the characters. So even she will cut Andy down in a minute. Like Andy's afraid of Samira because her tongue is just laser sharp.
I loved
Uh,
Samira.
yeah, and I didn't want to do victims. When I did Alexandra, um, I originally did her. I wanted to do her because I felt like I needed a little bit more humor in the book, right? So for a book that talks so much about race and class, I didn't want to have it so heavy. So I went back to add more humor. And I start out with this little girl, and first day of school, she's like, hello, I'm Mr. Honey Bunny, and this is my best friend, Alexandra. We live on the Upper West Side and love to make puppets. And I was like, okay, that's kind of funny. And then when I realized um, how I was writing the other kids relating to her, I felt bad for her. And this is all in my mind. And this is why I can't sleep at nights because I have these things like, oh, poor Alexandra. And so if you've read the series, you see that she probably has the biggest character arc of anyone. She goes from like the weird puppet girl in book one to the one that everyone kind of envies at the end because she is not afraid to be her. She wants to walk around with a puppet and she wants a little backpack that looks like, turtle and she wants to do this and she does it. And even Drew is like, wow, I really respect that, you know? And by the end, she's kind of the one that gives the best advice out of all of them, you know? And one of the things that just warmed my heart was I went to a school and this girl came in and like, oh my God, Mr. Kraft, that is Alexandra. She is just like Alexandra. But they loved her. You know what I mean? Like they embraced her idiosyncrasies. You know what I mean? Where I think before New Kid, she might have been like the weird girl. And they're like, oh my gosh, she's like Alexandra. I love Alexandra. So the empathy allowed them to give that girl a chance.
Oh,
And
interesting.
there was even a school where they're like, Mr. Kraft, that boy right there, that is Andy. And he was like, yeah, I kind of am. But he realized what being Andy was like, that they thought that maybe he was a little insensitive sometimes. And he was trying to work at it because when he sees what a jerk Andy can be, he's like, I don't want to be that jerk, but I try to do it in a loving way so that I don't point the fingers. Like, I don't like books where the kids are always right and the adults are like buffoons, or the parents know everything and the kids know nothing, or the teachers are dummies, or I wanted to give everyone a time to shine. And sometimes this one is right, sometimes this one is right. Sometimes Jordan's silly, but sometimes the silliest character is mom, Jordan's mom. I have a lot of fun writing for that character.
Can you talk a little bit about Liam?
Yeah, Liam is another one that I worked hard to break the stereotype, because when I was a kid, it seemed like every rich kid in the movies was played by James Spader. And James Spader, so Anthony Michael Hall and Molly Ringwald would be out minding their own business, eating ice cream, and James Spader would drive up in his Corvette, and he'd have his cardigan strapped around, and he'd have that rich smile smirk, and he would just come up and slap the ice cream out of Molly's hand and take Anthony Michael Hall's and stick it on his head for no reason. They're like, why did you do that? And he's like, because I'm rich. Like every rich kid was just horrible. And so I said, I want to take Jordan, this light-skinned black boy from Washington Heights, Drew, a darker-skinned black boy from the Bronx, Co-op City, and Liam, this really wealthy kid, white kid, who's almost embarrassed by his family's wealth, and make them three of the nicest kids and the best friends. And that's what I wanted to do. And Liam is actually more envious of Jordan's relationship with his dad and his mom than Jordan is of Liam's wealth, you
Mm.
know. And there's a lot more of that in Class Act, where Drew is like, can two people like us be friends as adults? Like, why are we trying to be friends? It's not going to last, because people like you are never going to be friends with people like me. But they learn to work it out. And, at the end of the day, I want my books to offer hope and the ability to dream, and that if you do something well, that you can embrace it, because so many kids just they brag about stuff that they can't do, and I was in the school in Stanford, and I said, yeah, you brag about failing stuff. And this kid said, yeah, I just flunked my science test last week. I'm like, why would you say that out loud? He said, well, because I did. I said, but if you got an A, would you tell someone? He says, maybe my mom's. I said, well, why wouldn't you tell your friends? Like, well, I wouldn't want to make anyone feel bad. I'm like, dude, if your friends will feel bad because you got a good grade, them ain't your friends. It may be time to look somewhere else, you know, but kids are always taught to dim their own light and brilliance in order to fit in with kids that don't even bother putting a light bulb in their lamp, you
Mm.
know, and so I try to inspire that. And like it can be awful. Again, I read all my reviews, and even though my friends are like, do not go on Goodreads, you'll only get your feelings hurt. Here I am on Goodreads. And one that I remember is with School Trip. I don't think that my largely poor, largely African American students are going to be able to relate to this class that goes to Paris. So I am not going to share this book with my class or put it on my bookshelf. And I'm like, then you don't need to teach Black kids, because you're saying that what a white kid can relate to Harry Potter, a kid who goes to wizard school and flies on a broom and cast magic spells, but black kids won't be able to see other kids go to Paris. My friend David Miller said when he was a kid, he loved National Geographic, and he always dreamed and said that one day he's going to travel the world. And now he goes to Ghana like every year to help out other kids.
Hmm.
So this teacher, by limiting and showing these kids of color that they aren't even allowed to dream, it's like, what are you going to give them their application for Walmart now? And like, okay, you're not going to do any better than this. And that's someone in my mind that again does not deserve the right to teach these kids if she's going to basically lock them in an emotional and intellectual cellar that they may never break out of.
There are a couple of teachers in your books who did that, and then in school trip, when the teachers were switched around,
Hmm.
they had to come to terms with things a little bit because they were put in positions that they didn't expect.
Yeah, like in the overall story arc, I gave every character, both black and white, or Latinx or whomever, the ability to learn and correct themselves if they needed, with the exception of Miss Rawl. Miss Rawl is just Miss Rawl. But even one of my favorite characters, the librarian, Miss Brickner, by book three, is like, wow, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I remember even with that getting someone called me out on Twitter, and she was like, um, I was disappointed in you because the librarian showed the black kid, like mean streets of South Uptown. And this would have been your opportunity to show the importance of librarians and blah, 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 blah. And someone else wrote, another librarian said, yeah, he did show how important we were. And I realized that I dropped the ball because I had a black girl come to me and she read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas and loved it and says, Miss, can I get another book like this? And she said she thought she meant another book with gang banging and police brutality and all that. So she gave her this book like that. And the girl read a couple pages or a chapter or two and gave it back the next day, like, nah, I don't want this. Sorry. And she said she didn't realize that the girl meant she wanted to read another character like Star, the protagonist, the young black girl who was smart. She used her intellect to help people. And she said after reading my cartoon about that, that she realized that she also just gave in and gave kids what she thought,
Mm.
And again, that's like you as a 12-year-old girl only getting to read Handmaid's Tale. What does that do to you as a young girl? What does that do to the boys around you who are reading that? So right there, here, this is the boys, this is you. And it never gets any better. And as you get older, it just spreads. And I want to do a book that every kid thinks that they are on a level playing field, or at least can have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, no, it's very successful. I think you did a great job with that.
Thank you.
So were the books, Class Act, New Kid, and School Trip meant to be a trilogy, or is that something that came about later?
It came about later because, like I said, no, I don't know if anyone expected, that one day it would be in 13 languages and there'd be a movie in the works and there'd be a jigsaw puzzle and a sketchbook and um I think that well I got a one book deal and then when I won the Kirkus it was like oh okay this is and sales were good and I'm fortunate because I have a book that a lot of times the books that have critical acclaim don't necessarily have commercial appeal. And I saw a list of Newbery winning books, and they named like the top 5 or 10 that had commercial appeal, critical acclaim, and kids really wanted to read it. And mine was on there. And that was a really special list to be on. Um, so when it came time to do my next book, I think even my publisher, we had the discussion, well, maybe you should just do a whole nother book, all new characters, all new school. Or you could do the other seventh grade, next year, seventh grade, and maybe Jordan can walk around and that was one that I really fought to do because again, not to put you on the spot, but I'm sure you read a lot of books. Are there any Black characters that are household names that you can think of? You might think of the book, but is there a Greg Heffley? Is there a, you know, uh, Harry Potter, a Percy Jackson, a name where you're just like, oh yeah, this one, you know? And when I ask kids and teachers, most times they'll say, "Oh, the kid from Captain Underpants." Like, well, what's his name? Oh, I don't know. Or, oh, well, in such and such's book, they had a Black friend. I'm like, what's their name? You know?
Jesse from Anger is a Gift.
Okay, okay. And but you know what I mean? But it's not the household name like Charlie Brown,
Yes,
Craig Heffley.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I get your point.
So I didn't think that I could do that with one book.
Uh-huh.
So I had a talk with my agent, Judy Hanson, who's been amazing. And I said, I need 3 books with these characters because I want Jordan and Drew and Liam, Alexander, some of them to be iconic characters,
Mhm.
like household names in that, in this kind of realm. And I didn't think I could do that with one book. So it was really important for me to do 2 more books with those characters.
Good. Why Paris?
So when it comes time to do a sequel, right? Or, part of the series or just a standalone book, um, one of the things is to me, it has to be similar enough to the other books so that you feel it's a new kid book. But it
Okay.
has to be different enough where it's like you don't want to be like, it's the same book. Like, why did they even make it? Like how much difference was there between Halloween 19 and Halloween 20? It was the same thing. You just had on a different shirt. You know what I mean? Or just a different location. And so I was like, if I put the kids back in the same school in the same class, I didn't want to have to come up with something outrageous to make it different. Like, oh, look, there's an alien spaceship and it just kidnapped Andy. I didn't want to make something happen. And I said, so if I want to keep the characters, the best thing to do is to change the scenario, change the scenery. And then if I put them in a country where they don't speak the language, then they're all the new kids, so they're all equally uncomfortable. And I thought that that was an ideal way to potentially end the series. Like right now, I'm not doing any more new kids. I can't say I won't ever. Again, I would like to because I love the characters and I, would love to see a Jordan Banks Thanksgiving Day parade float and, like that kind of stuff. Uh, right now, and I'm sure you'll ask this, right now I'm working on a brand new 3-book series that I can't talk about, unfortunately. So you have to have me back. Um, but I just really wanted to do iconic characters where you know their name. And I tell you, one of the things that meant the most, this woman sent me a photo of her daughter. And they were like in Iowa. We're talking red ponytail, freckles, the works. And she was dressed up like Drew. Um, and this is your favorite character today. So to have a white girl from Iowa dressed up like this character, I think is such an important thing because it gives the kids opportunity to know each other, even if it's not in person. So if she sees a Drew in the cafeteria, she might not always have the same preconceived notions. Oh, he's a rapper and he lives just with his mom and he wants to play in the NBA, and that she's like, oh, maybe he's like Drew, and actually take the time to get to know each other. The same with the Liams, the same with the Alexandras, that you give each other time and a chance and a break to actually see if you can be friends. Not everyone can be friends. Like Grandpa says, you can't like everyone, Jordan, but you don't have to be a jerk about it either.
Mhm. Exactly. One more question about the school trip, or not
Okay.
the school trip, but school trip.
Hmm.
Um, Mall behavior is different for Black kids and white kids, and some of the white kids didn't understand that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So as a parent of two African American boys, I think you're just used to preparing them a little differently. Um, I remember one of my sons was hanging out with friends and they were like 12 and they went to a pizza shop and he came home and says, "Oh, Dad, so and so went into the soda thing and opened up the soda and drank it and then put it back in the thing. Oh, it was hysterical." I'm like, next time that happens, leave the store, call me, I will come and pick you up. Because generally, whether it's what happens or my perception of what happens or whatever, you're the one that they will remember. Look, you're the one Black kid. Of course, like, oh yeah, it was him, and and so I wanted to show that the fear is real, that that's not made up. Even in class act, I have an interaction with a police officer, and that was based on real life. I'm in Stamford, Connecticut, and I stop at a light, and I'm like this, with my hand on the wheel, and a white police officer leans in and says, "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to get rid of that." And in that split second, I'm like, oh man, what does he see? And in my overactive imagination, I'm like, I'm gonna floor it and go through and just run for my life. I'm like, what? He says, "Oh, those New York Giants gloves." I'm like, My Giants go, yeah, I'm a New England Patriots fan and I hate the Giants. I'm like, you can't joke with me like that. I'm about to wet my pants. Like it's funny. So I put that in class act. And I made the police officer the nicest, friendliest guy possible because I wasn't showing that all police officers are bad. I wanted to show that fear and the perception because of what you see and what you hear. You can't help but be a certain way. Just like I'm sure there are neighborhoods you don't go in and places you don't do and whatever. And so the mall scene also happened to my youngest son. He was about to go out for July 4th and he goes and gets a shirt that he had bought a couple weeks before but never put on because he was saving it for this picnic, and it had the security tag on it. And he's like, "Oh, shoot. All right, Dad, I'm going to go and have them take this off." I said, "No, you're not. You're not going without me." I got my car keys. We drove in. Let me do the talking. Hey, my son, and you left the security tag on. We don't have the receipt, but if you look up my rewards number, maybe it will show you the receipt. Well, we can't do it without the receipt. And how do we know he didn't steal it? And blah, blah, blah. Okay. So Newbery winning, Coretta Scott King, Kirk, none of that matters. What matters at this time is, black man with his black kid. And this guy who just a clerk at, Bob's Discount Sports or whatever, um, just thinks that my son stole the shirt. And I'm like, and me as their dad, I would bring my son back like we're, the black Bonnie and Clyde of the 2020s. We're, the father and son team that we're knocking over Bob's stores one shirt at a time, you know? And so there are times when even I've been around white friends and they're like solutions. Oh, well, just go back and tell them blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't always work,
Mm.
you know? So there are little things in there that if you don't get it, it's fine. But for kids who get it, they realize that they're not the only one. And again, there's that little bit of like a hug from the characters, and it just makes them be like, okay, it's not just me. And that's important. That's important for books because it makes a kid feel like the book is more theirs, like it's their book.
I think it's also important for other kids to understand what African American kids go through, for not people who are not people of color, kids who are
Yeah,
not kids of color, to understand what kids of color might be going through.
I had one of my kids' friends growing up, first grade. Every time I went to the school, they have him sitting in the hallway to the point where I thought his desk was in the hallway. I'm like, but he would come over my house and he was wonderful, smart, just nice. But that teacher had no patience. So whenever something happened, and if he gave an opinion or if he did this, because sometimes kids have to act one way around their block and they come to school, they can't always shut that off. If they're in a neighborhood where you have to be a little tougher, you have to speak up for yourself. And then, teacher says, "Oh, it's nap time." Well, I'm not tired. That's it. Go sit out in the hallway. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not one of those things that's just always, they're a bad kid. And one of my worst school visits, and this is before I was, Jerry Craft, where I would stand up a little bit more. I go into the school in Philly and I'm about to start. And they had warned me about one kid. Teachers always like warn me, oh, that's Devontae. You're gonna have to watch out for them. And sometimes I'd be like, all right, I need someone to hand out pencils. And they're the first ones. And they're handing out pencils. Like they just want to be seen, right? So the kids are talking, and the one kid goes, hey, yo, shut up. Because he wants me to start. The teacher's like, that's it. You're out of here. And I'm like, he was actually more respectful to me than the kids who were talking. He was trying to get them to shut up so I could start. And they kicked him out. And it has haunted me because I wish that I would have said, no, listen, here, he's going to sit next to me. He'll help me pass out paper. He'll help me read to the class. I'm going to put him in a position of um, of honor and gratitude rather than you always waiting for this kid to say something so you can punish him.
Mm.
Why would that kid want to go back to that school and knowing that, man, I'm going to be in this school for 7 more years? By the time I'm in eighth grade or ninth grade, they're going to think that I'm, you know, just whomever, you know? So,
Interesting. So tell me about the movie.
it is from Spring Hill Entertainment, which is run by Maverick Carter and LeBron James. It is in conjunction with Universal Pictures to produce a live action version, so not animated, live action. And Prentice Penny is directing it. He was the showrunner for the HBO special Insecure.
Oh,
And
cool.
I'm executive producer on the movie. So we've seen one treatment and we saw a first draft of the screenplay and we're waiting on the next draft. And the writer's strike pushed it back like a year or whatever. Um, my timing just with everything, like the year I went to Newbery is when 2 months later the world got shut down from COVID. So they didn't have ALA that year. And I didn't travel and do the things that I was supposed to go to, like Beijing and places and give my speeches and things. And then to get the movie and then this happens, but it's like, all right, take a licking and keep on ticking. So once the screenplay is where we want it, then I guess they take it to the next step and start scouting locations and hiring the staff and all that stuff. So it's pretty exciting.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
What else is on the front burner,
Um, New 3-book series. I have to hand it in July.
which you can't tell me about, but
And
you
tell you
will
about
when I
it.
have you back on.
Yeah, but it is graphic novels, 3 books. And then I have one really big surprise that I really can't talk about. So this is, um, but that we should be able to announce that in the next couple of months as well. And other than that, it's just, the school visits and the travel, like the amount of travel in conjunction with I could draw 24 hours a day. Like this is my studio here, so this is my awards and my books, and that's the Newbery Medal there, and the Coretta Scott King and the Kirkus Prize. And so I'm in a well-lit area, a lot of books from friends. So it's a really peaceful place. So, but like I said, I could travel every day to another school by the amount of invites that I get, but I know I can't do that and continue to produce books in a timely manner. And no kid wants to wait 3 years. They'll read School Trip and like, wow, this is great. when's your next book, Mr. Kraft? I'm like, you better read New Kid again and just keep reading them until the next one is out. Like, I cannot just, crank these out because it takes about a year, more or less, to do this from start to finish.
So what would you tell your 10-year-old self?
You know, um, I get asked that a lot, and I think if I had warned myself or prepared myself, I wouldn't be myself because the I'm as proud of the things that I didn't do as much as I'm proud of the things that I did do. And I think that the years of rejection and just, going to school visits and having people think that I was there to fix the copier, and just like, back in college, going to buy design markers to do my homework at School of Visual Arts, and they wouldn't sell them to me because kids like me only bought markers to graffiti the subways, you
Wow.
know. So I wish it was easier, but in school trip I gave the story of the butterfly, the caterpillar that is in the chrysalis or the cocoon, and it's the struggle to break out of that strengthens its wings to be a butterfly. And I think if I hadn't had that kind of uh, resistance to break out of it, I wouldn't be able to achieve what I have, and then to finally, like to go through books during, COVID and then writer strike and book banning, and then they have see videos of people going to school board meetings talking about why people shouldn't read New Kid. And but then, without that, I wouldn't have been on the Daily Show with Roy Wood Jr. talking about my book. I wouldn't have been, selected for various things. Um, so I wish it was easier because at the end of the day, all I'm trying to do is to get kids to read, and be nicer to each other. Um, but to have, angry letters and death threats occasionally, and we're gonna burn your book. I'm like, okay, well, if you're gonna burn my books, please at least get them from an independent bookstore because independent bookstores are what the lifeblood of our community. So at least do some good with your ignorance, you know. Um, and you know what I mean, like things like that you're not prepared for. Um, and but this is unfortunately what comes with the territory, and I have to kind of help other authors do it because HarperCollins has been amazing to me, and they have protected me because they know the person that I am, you know um and it is all about the kids. So with their protection, I'm able to speak up for others, and help others come through. So when I see I call him my publishing baby brother, the Tori Maldonados of the world, you know, um, it hopefully makes it a little easier for them as well.
Well,
So there you
thank
have it.
you. I do have it. This was
You do
great. Is there
have it.
anything we missed?
I don't think so. This is what, about 6 hours? This is everything I have to say.
Well, thank you so very much, Jerry. This has been fantastic. And I really hope that people who are hearing this, um, look at the YouTube video as well, because I think that there was some, just when you showed some of the books, I think that that would be really important for people to see. And I think that everyone should read your books because they're fantastic. And there are lots of people who,
Okay, so since this video, this will encourage people. So that's the actual Newbery Medal.
that's awesome. It's the only graphic novel, the first graphic novel to get the Newbery honor.
Yep, first and only.
That's amazing. Very excited for you. So thank you again. And I hopefully will have you back when your next trilogy is out. I'm so excited.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Uh,
everyone.